Why didn't America attack the Taliban as aggressively as it did ISIS to try to wipe them out? Because the difference is, while we did work with local forces like the Northern Alliance, the operation against ISIS and Syria and the locals that were in northeastern Syria, there was a lot less sympathies, I would say, for ISIS, even though there's not a ton of sympathies for the Taliban. That's the first thing. Our support for the SDF was not really us engaging in on the ground a ton of operations, where in Afghanistan it was a full-fledged invasion, and it was a supporting local forces, which I think shows how effective Inherent Resolve was in working with local forces to combat terrorism, and in comparison to American forces directly getting involved and directly being like on the ground. Now there's some scenarios where that could be used, but I think that's a significant difference there. I would also say that while there was a coalition in Afghanistan, the coalition also kind of followed that lead in Syria and was very successful. In the yes, they were already destroying ISIS. We saw an ally to help. They needed our planes. We needed their boots on the ground. Win-win. Yes, but I would say that the SDF wasn't necessarily destroying ISIS. In fact, if it wasn't for American air support in Kobani, it's very hard to say that they would have held the city. In fact, I'm reading about that literally right now in this book on how significant and how important American air support was into stopping ISIS. Because they got into the city's inner limits. They were fighting house by house, room by room. They were fighting in Kobani. The fact that they were able to hold that city is a fucking miracle. Let me actually read a few passages from this book quick. I mean, people thought Kobani was a done deal. Like when it comes to that specifically. Let me see. ISIS had begun the siege of Kobani on September 15th, 2014. The offensive opened with an assault in which ISIS used recoilless rifles, a series of rocket launch systems, and artillery to bombard the city's outskirts. A combined arms attack planned expertly and designed to besiege the city on multiple fronts at once. For ISIS, capturing Kobani presented several advantages. One was unimpeded domain over the road that connected its self-declared capital, Raqqa, to the Syrian city of Aleppo. It also offered a chance to conquer the Kurds, whom ISIS viewed as infidels. And there was this reality: if Kobani fell, the other Kurdish areas would certainly fall too. The land around the town was flat, giving the YPG no ability to use geography as a means of surprise. After taking Kobani, ISIS would soon control the entire Syrian-Turkish border. Now, let me say something about the Syrian-Turkish border. ISIS fighters were seeping through that border. They were going across that border to join ISIS like crazy, and the Turkish government were doing basically bad shit to stop them. Which also, if they were able to establish that on the border, holy shit. Okay, so let's be clear. They had recoilless rifles and artillery bombard the entire city and its outskirts. Then, they sent in tanks. And behind those tanks were veteran ISIS fighters, the most radical ones from around the world. Europe. These are the people who came halfway across the world to die. Like, I don't know what to call them besides, like, a force of the most barbaric motherfuckers in the world. And they're fighting a bunch of people with AK-47 and grenades. How did ISIS get US weapons and tanks? Oh, okay. Well, the tanks, I don't know if... I'm not a weapons expert, but I don't think those tanks are American. I think a lot of them are like really, really old. They're not like M1 Abrams. But a lot of it, some of it could be through Timber Sycamore, where we didn't give weapons to them directly, but weapons were traded around to other organizations in the region that eventually did end up in the hands of ISIS. A lot of people try to use that to say that we supported ISIS, but they're being really disingenuous when they say that, because in a civil war, weapons trades hands a lot. That'd be like saying if we dropped weapons to the French resistance and then the Germans captured those weapons eventually, saying like we supported the Nazi government with weapons. Like that would be disingenuous. Now, that's one thing. The next thing is that they captured a lot of bases in Iraq that were not ready to defend themselves and then just stole all their weapons, a lot of which are American made and American provided. And that's where they got a ton of American weapons. And then what they would do is when they captured the city, not only would they raid the weapons, but they'd also let everybody out of prison and be like, hey, you want a new life? You have to join ISIS. You don't want to join ISIS? No, you want to join ISIS. And many of the people in prisons, of course, were already terrorists, so they were like, fuck, I mean, this is a really radical group. I'm going to join this then. Thought the tanks were former Soviet? Yes. They're going to be mostly from like Saddam Hussein's regime and like other like older style regimes that are no longer here. Dude, most of the AKs you see here, well, no, the AKs is different from what I'm talking about when it comes to ISIS. These AKs could have come from anywhere. literally anywhere. Like when you look at an AK-47, it's going to be really hard to really date where they came from. It could be the collapse of the Soviet Union. It could come from Romania. It could come from anywhere, man. Let me read a little bit more. For the Syrian Kurds, as the days passed and no one came to their aid, neither Turkey, which refused to close the border to ISIS.
The militants have tried numerous times to take the crossing in order to surround Kobani from all sides. The Turkish government is compounding the problem for Kurds by not allowing military supplies to flow through the crossing to Kobani's Kurdish defenders. And Kurds attempting to cross from Turkey to Syria to join Kobani's defense have been tear gassed by Turkish security.
That's true too. While they would have let ISIS fighters just flow in succinctly, they would stop Kurds from trying to cross the Turkish border, making it very difficult for them to get more people there to defend the city, and they would stop military supplies, make it even more difficult. Turkey did everything to undermine it. In fact, let me see, I posted this a while ago. Just a few days after US airstrikes began, ISIS dominated the media narrative by raising 2 of its black flags on the east side of the city. On October 7th, the Turkish president, Tayyip Erdogan, who loudly opposed American assistance to the YPG, put it succinctly, U.S. airstrikes had yet to make a dent in ISIS steamroll. Here's Erdogan's statement about the city. This is how sure everyone in the city was going to fall.
Meanwhile,
yeah, they literally were trying to stop them from trying to prevent ISIS from taking over. That's how bad fucking... Turkey did nothing but help ISIS almost the entirety of the Syrian civil war. Kobani became a rallying cry. In the wake of their savagery in Sinjar, including gutting images of women being carried away by screaming from their families to face rape and enslavement, an outcry grew among regular citizens who questioned how the West could sit back and allow one more humanitarian disaster to unfold unchecked. Okay, here it is. ISIS launched its Kobani offensive by pounding the town's countryside from both the east and west, and quickly killed a number of YPG and YPJ members. Morale plummeted as the death toll climbed and ground was lost, and the Syrian Kurds began to feel certain they could not hold the city. Anyway, and they had AK-47 and grenades. That's what they had. The fact that they were able to stop them is literally nothing short of a fucking miracle. What book is that, Dylan? The Daughters of Kobani. It's a really good book. When I read about the Battle of Kobani, it literally is just like this. Because after they just took all the surrounding villages, they dug deep into that city. And they were fighting literally house by house. There would be situations where, like, let me look up a Kobani. So this is how the entire city looked by the end of the battle. It was literally all rubble. You see this one building on the right? That would be full of Syrian Kurds, YPG, YPJ fighters. And on the other building over here, it'd be full of ISIS fighters. That's how fucking close the front lines were at times. But it wasn't like you just stand out of a window and go... You would put like these like doors up against the window, or this would happen all the time. They would bang a hole in the wall, like the tiniest hole, put a sniper or a rifle in there, and use that as a point to shoot, because that makes it literally as difficult as possible for somebody to hit you. They'd have to shoot right into that hole in the wall, or smash out the wall with an RPG to kill you. This is what I'm talking about right here. So this person has like a sandbag in front of him, some towels and stuff, and he knocked out a hole in the wall big enough so he could mount his heavy machine gun and fire through it. So that's exactly what I was talking about earlier when I talk about smashing holes in the wall. They were that close, where you could sometimes literally like hear them talking.
In Kobani now, you never enter a building through the front gate or the front door.
One way they found to avoid the snipers is by burrowing through buildings, just punching holes in the walls so they can move from place to place without exposing themselves to the open air and exposing themselves to the snipers.
Bingo. ISIS would do the same thing, so you don't have to run through the street every time. They literally would destroy walls and houses so they could just move from house to house down an entire like city block, so they wouldn't have to expose themselves to the open air where they could get like sniper killed.
She walks us to the council room, describing a recent battle to take the building back from ISIS.
She says there were about 40 ISIS fighters just in these rooms here. So it's not that they're fighting between buildings and across streets, but room to room. And you can see some of the damage. You can see the bullet holes. This was real close quarter fighting.
Azima shows us where the enemy is. Not far.
Like, and if you look at like wreckage of the city, like Jesus Christ, look at these images. Look how much this city was torn apart. And you got to remember, most of this was either American airstrikes or during the start of the battle, ISIS artillery and tanks. Like look how close these buildings are to each other. You're literally fighting building by building, room by room. Look how close these buildings are. Hey, can we get some footage of the Battle of Kobani? We'll look at some footage.
The majority Kurdish city of Kobani in northern Syria has been under siege by Islamic State militants for weeks. Here's a look at some of the key battlegrounds in the fight for the city. Mishchener Hill is a strategic high ground overlooking Kobani.
Okay, so this was when this fucking hill, okay, oh my god, I am such a fucking nerd. The fact that I literally know which hill was which hill. This hill was a strategic location that oversaw the city. And when this hill fell, holy shit, morale for the SDF, well, it wasn't the SDF at this point. It was just the YPJ and the YPG. The SDF wasn't created till later during the American and alliance with these people. But then when this fell, morale plummeted because this was a major point that was lost. And then they actually went into the physical city and fought. And that's when American airstrikes got involved, and that's when it was a major deciding factor. See how much of a vantage point this is? See how important this is strategically? If you have this type of point and you put a bunch of snipers up here or artillery, and once they count that one hill, they had vantage points over the city. I mean, the area was flat, and once they had that vantage point over that one hill I talked about how they captured, like, that was a massive loss. Once that happened, like, anybody traditionally looking at the situation from a military's perspective would say, I think the city's gonna fall. Do you see how important this hill is from this perspective when that's the city right there? When this hill fell, it was a strategic point where they could overlook the city, strike the city with artillery, stuff like that. One of the people on there, and I forget the name of them, but it was this female fighter. When they were like, we need to pull out. ISIS is too much, there's too many. One of those people took a grenade, strapped themselves with the grenade onto their body, ran towards an ISIS tank, blew themselves up, and took the tank out with them. That's how dedicated these people were to stopping ISIS from taking it, because they know what ISIS does when they capture. There is no surrendering to ISIS. A hand grenade took out a tank. I don't know what type of grenade it was, but it was some sort of explosive device. That's how the story goes, at least. Might have been an RPG. It was an explosive of some sort. I'm not a weapons expert.
Islamic State forces overtook it as they advanced toward the city in early October.
Yep, it was October. It was September when the battle really started to shift in tone. September.
Releasing a propaganda video set to show fighters firing from the hill. The militants' assault on the city has come hardest from the
There
south.
it is. They had tanks. The YPG didn't have tanks. And by the way, what you're seeing right now is basically all they had to defend the city. And we saw what the ISIS fighters had. Rockets. They had like rockets and like rocket systems. They had recoilless rifles. They had tanks. They had mortars. They had most like really determined veterans. Now, as you can see, during the end of the battle, they had to send more recruits because they got more resistance than they thought coming. And then American air support really was a deciding factor. Really was. There's an ISIS tank rolling in. It has the black flag, which we talked about what the black flag represents earlier today, chat. And what the black flag has to do with a certain hadith that has to do with black flags coming from the certain region. One second. I think I had it here. Khorasan province. It has to do with a certain hadith. It said the black flags of something will come out of Khorasan province. A lot of extremist groups use black flags. If you hear that banging, that's most likely somebody trying to knock out a wall to like set up a sniper position or something. Hey, can I just say, guys, I really love that I just had like a really nerdy and geeky segment on the Battle of Kobani, and there was more than like 500 people that actually listened to it. I remember when I used to talk about this in a room full of like 15 college kids, and like I could barely like hold people's attention. And so it's pretty cool that people actually give a fuck. I don't know. God damn, this shit has butterfly effects, huh? That's the thing. It's also why, okay, I'm about to say something that's probably going to make me lose my lefty credential card a little bit here. But when people say stuff like, America created the Taliban, I want to like jump off into a volcano. I want to jump into a volcano because that is such a simplistic analysis of what happened during the Soviet war. It destroys my brain. It destroys what brain cells I have, because they're not talking about like, okay, number one, the Mujahideen didn't just become the Taliban. That's the first thing. Second thing, we didn't create the Mujahideen. We gave the Mujahideen weapons, sometimes with the ISI, stuff like that. Number two, a lot of this removes responsibility from the ISI, which did stuff independent of the United States. And there are problems with some of how we conducted ourselves during that. But this simplistic analysis leaves people with like the dumb idea that like the Mujahideen just became Taliban one day, and then the Taliban was like, we hate America now, and then attacked America. Like, that's not how it went. And that simplistic analysis doesn't like give people a full picture that could be used to critically examine the situation, so stuff like that doesn't happen again. Yeah, the Taliban fought a lot of the Mujahideen we supported. Exactly, yeah. Appreciate that. I feel we do bear some responsibility. Well, of course. But I think a lot of people say that America created the Taliban is so fucking stupid. That sentence is meaningless.
A Kurd is a Kurd.
That sentence means next to nothing. We could just keep learning about Kobani right now. Unironically. We can do a little bit more on Kobani, I think.
As a nation, we've been at war in this part of the world for over a decade, and it looks like we could be at war for another 10 years.
Hey, look, he's at ISIS. He's at the dude. This guy is doing some dangerous reporting. He's at the headquarters of ISIS, Turkey. Ooh, that's gonna piss off a few of my Turkish fans. I'm sorry, but I mean, I'm not wrong.
Maybe more. Imagine that.
I remember when I was a little bit younger. I was like, when I was 18. I hate to say when I was a little bit younger. I'm only 20. When I was 18, I remember saying like, ISIS's best ally is Turkey, and then I like tempered down my rhetoric in 2019, and out of this 2020 again, my rhetoric's ramping back up to no, I was right. I shouldn't have ramped down my rhetoric. They are.
President Obama said he had no strategy yet for taking on ISIS. Then, in September, he addressed the nation.
My fellow Americans, tonight I want to speak to you about what the United States will do with our friends and allies to degrade and ultimately destroy the terrorist group known as ISIL.
The president promised this war would be different, with no American boots on the ground. Instead, he said there would be, quote, Iraqi boots on the ground in Iraq and Syrian boots on the ground in Syria.
True.
Sounds good.
And that strategy fucking worked. It fucking worked. It worked. Operation Inherent Resolve was a massive success, and no one will ever be able to convince me otherwise. People have tried to, and every time, man, I feel like we're speaking two languages.
But where are they? I've been reporting on this region for years, and people
It's almost like if you can find a group of people that hate terrorism, and then you allow them to manage their own affairs and assist them in combating terrorism when you have a common goal, that works better than you go in there and dictate to them their own terms and then don't care about the security of the region or rebuilding or infrastructure like we did for the first 6 to 7 years in Afghanistan. Oh, that's crazy.
In the real Middle East, ISIS has managed to break out of its traditional strongholds in Fallujah and Ramadi, capture Iraq's second largest city, Mosul, and take over about half of Syria. In less than 6 months, ISIS erased the border between Iraq and Syria and carved out an area the size of Maryland, declaring it an Islamic state.
Okay. That's a really on-the-nose comparison for me, all things considered, if you look at my background. Damn.
Washington calls this state a cancer. The cure, it's...
Okay, when you say that state of cancer, I hope you mean ISIS and their caliphate and not Maryland.
Says is not to send in one army, but to prop up 5 armies. In central Iraq, the U.S. is rebuilding and
Listen to this guy talk about it. He's like, like this doesn't seem like a realistic goal. This seems like it doesn't work. Fast forward 3 years past this point, it worked. It worked almost flawlessly.
retraining the Iraqi army. In western Iraq, it's paying Sunni tribes to join the battle. In northern Iraq, it's sending guns to the Kurds.
Yep.
In northern Syria, Washington says it will stand up a moderate rebel army.
It says a moderate rebel army. This guy pretends that they're not moderate. If you compare the SDF, the YPG, the YPJ, the SDF being created later after American involvement, it 100% in comparison to the other rebel groups was moderate, quote unquote. Hell, I mean, definitely when you look on issues like women's rights, are you kidding me?
And in southern Syria,
Although U.S. officials don't like to admit it, the regime of President Bashar al-Assad is still in power and growing stronger. The fact is, these groups hate each other and are in no condition to put up a united fight against ISIS.
This is true. And a lot of people don't understand this, the Kurds in northeastern Syria and the Kurds in northern Iraq have vastly different views of the world and the political standings and political beliefs. The government of Iraqi Kurdistan has very different beliefs about Aslan than the SDF YPJ does. And in fact, the government of northeastern Iraq, that Kurdistan regional government, has a somewhat productive relationship with the Turkish government, where the Turkish government views the SDF as basically a terrorist organization and wing of the PKK.
The U.S. has tried to sort out the divisions between Sunnis and Shiites and Kurds in the past. It did not go well. Now we're trying it again on a larger scale and by remote control. The president has said it will take years, as he put it, to degrade and eventually destroy ISIS.
He talks about this in such like a tone, like it's bound to fail, yet it worked.
He's been fairly cautious. Vice President Biden, not so much.
We will follow them to the gates of hell until they are brought to justice. Because hell is where they will reside. Hell is where they will reside.
Jesus.
Well, for the past several weeks, the gates of hell have had a very specific address, the town of Kobani in Syria, just across the border from here. But the U.S. and its allies didn't chase ISIS there until, according to a senior U.S. military officials, it was almost too late.
You tell him, Jack.
But Kobani is still holding on, as we found out when we visited the little city that stood up to ISIS. There are two things about Kobani that made this small Kurdish city in Syria the focus of international attention. The first is its location, just across the border from Turkey, which means the world's press has watched and reported as the ISIS onslaught reduced large parts of the city to smoking piles of rubble. The other is the heroic resistance of the people of Kobani. Theirs is a remarkable tale of courage under fire. It's a tale that couldn't be told because, surrounded and cut off from the world, Kobani was too dangerous for reporters to visit. A fact that was not lost on ISIS. In a slickly produced video, they introduced a report from Kobani.
Hello.
Presented by one of their hostages, British photojournalist John Cantley, who'd been forced to become a mouthpiece for his captors. In the video, he mocks reports of an ISIS retreat from parts of the city and the outlets that publish them.
The Western media, and I can't see any of their journalists here in the city of Kobani, have been saying recently that the Islamic State are on the retreat.
Cantley went
That didn't age well, did it?
on to claim that ISIS had control of 90% of the city and was now
They never controlled 90%.
involved in mop-up operations.
They controlled a large percentage, but not that much. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't believe so. Did that guy make it out okay? I have zero clue. Someone would have to Google it for me. Whereabouts are unknown? Really?
ISIS controls no more than 50% of Kobani, and American airstrikes are gradually reducing that area to rubble.
True. American airstrikes were a deciding factor in the battle.
Meanwhile, on the free side of the city, Kurdish men and women, outgunned and outnumbered, are not just standing their ground, they're smiling. 34-year-old Azima is a field commander on the southern front, where much of the fighting is happening.
Wait, Azima? Wait a second. I recognize that name. Wait a fucking second. I recognize that name.
34-year-old Azima is a field...
Huh, it really is her. I read like multiple chapters where this woman was involved. Huh. That's wild. I don't know. I'm nerding out a little bit. I'm sorry. Oh my God.
Field commander on the southern front, where much of the fighting is happening. She takes us on a dangerous tour of the frontline positions. Now we run, she says.
That is what I was talking about. That other guy was just like running like with the gun like this. Like, you don't do that. You get down.
Now we...
Oh, and those black tarps. I read about the tarps. So a lot of times they didn't even have enough stuff to put between, so they just get black tarps so they can't be seen, so it's harder to shoot them as they run between streets.
Run, she says.
You crouch down, not so you don't get shot by snipers, or it's harder to, like, get a target on you.
Sheets hung across intersections cloak our movements from enemies.
I'm sorry. Just the cut from, like, her expertly running crouched down like she's done a million of times. That journalist just stumbling over himself as he tried to run over.
Sheets hung across intersections cloak our movements from enemy snipers. You stay low, run fast. Azimat leads us to City Hall. In Kobani now, you never enter a building through the front gate or the front door. We watch them all the time, she says, and make sure to shoot them before they get too close. Outside, I ask Azima why so many of her fighters are young women. As Kurdish women, she says, we would rather lose our lives than our land or our principles. Those principles are in evidence everywhere in Kobani. These fighters are members of the People's Protection Units. Women and men live together and fight together. There are no formal ranks, no organized units, and everyone calls each other comrade. The Kurds...
They don't call it comrade, they say Haval or something. It's like Haval. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly.
...of Kobani are a throwback.
They don't say comrade. They say comrade, but they say it in Kurdish.
Progressive idealists in a region that may be descending into medieval darkness.
I really hope I'm not boring anybody. I know this isn't like recent news. This is a battle from 2014, but I've been researching this a lot lately, and it's super interesting to me. And I think generally important. Holy fuck, Azima survived a sniper shot near her heart and a fucking car bomb that broke both of her legs. She's a badass. I mean, what'd you expect?
How could I leave my land and my people, Ali asks. My brothers and neighbors died to protect this place. How can I leave it? Those who remain here rely on a system of mutual assistance for everything. There is only one bakery in town, and the bread is distributed for free all around the city. The few doctors left in town treat the wounded in a makeshift clinic in an abandoned home. Even the weapons are a result of community organizing, like this homemade tank used to ferry fighters to the front lines. ISIS, on the other hand, has state-of-the-art weapons, including tanks and armored vehicles. The only reason Kobani survived...
So look, the enemy had tanks and armored vehicles to like ram... Look at this! And again, the Kurds had nothing in comparison to this. Like, nothing in comparison.
ISIS, on the other hand, has state-of-the-art weapons, including tanks and armored vehicles.
Look how they're using this to just ram shells into the city.
The only reason Kobani survived this long,
my God,
is because the U.S. is conducting daily airstrikes and helped negotiate reinforcements.
Now, it isn't state-of-the-art, but if you have like an old tank, that's better than having no tanks at all. Having that armor is helpful for transporting troops, breaking through walls, smashing buildings. It's useful.
Reinforcements from Iraqi Kurdistan and from the Free Syrian Army. But ISIS fighters are now dug into their positions in Kobani, and driving
It's a decent movie.
Them out of an urban area is a challenge. But did it need to be this difficult? Only a few weeks ago, we were watching on a hill in Turkey along with refugees from Kobani who watched horrified as ISIS fighters closed in on the city. The militants made no effort to hide their movements. They were marching in without a care in the world.
These people are extremely frustrated by what's happening here. They see ISIS fighters in their villages, and they say if the Americans really want to bomb ISIS, they're not hard to find.
American officials said publicly at the time that defending Kobani was not a priority.
So for Americans, straight to John Kerry, I was just about to talk about a statement. They basically, John Kerry said something along the lines of, there's Kobanis all across the Middle East and Syria. There's everywhere. The Kobani is not particularly strategically significant. And that was the way they tried to kind of weasel out of assisting Kobani.
As horrific as it is to watch in real time what's happening in Kobani, it's also important to remember you have to step back and understand the strategic objective
God, literally basically word for word. Okay, damn. How do I remember that? How do I remember that?
The world's cameras trained on the city, the U.S. was eventually embarrassed into coming to the rescue. The city is now
the reason why we were able to embarrass them into coming to the rescue is because journalists basically went to hills in Turkey and just like documented it from across the side. So you could literally see ISIS closing in as these people, these ragtag group, defended with AKs and grenades. It was kind of hard not to get shamed into doing it.
A key battleground, a test case for the American strategy in the fight against ISIS. Dijwar Havat is a legendary fighter from Kobani. We are very grateful to America for the help it has sent us, he says, but it came very late, and we are going
I wonder what this guy thinks of Donald Trump. Just curious.
to need a lot more of it. For those who hold the line in Kobani, all this is just a distant echo. To pass the time, Vian sings a song of mourning for her fallen comrades. She knows that Kobani can only be remembered one of two ways, as the site of a heroic victory over ISIS, or as the site of a horrific massacre. Which is why everyone in Kobani, the old and the young, women and men, carries a special bullet around. They call it the Bullet of Honor and plan to use it to take their own life if the enemy manages to get through the line. Better that, they say, than falling into the hands of ISIS alive.
That's why when I told that story about a person strapping a grenade to the chest and running at ISIS, I mean, if ISIS captures you, I read like testimony from this book of like, I saw them capture a friend of mine. What did they do? They beheaded them and then rolled their head towards us to show them what fate awaited us. Like this is, and even if they don't kill them, even if they're already dead, they'll behead them just to make an example. Like they would spread beheadings all over social media to intimidate and terrify people. Not to mention what happened at, my God, what happened on Sinjar Mountain should be enough to show ISIS's brutality. With the enslavement and slaughter, they kill people's husbands and take their wives and sell them into slavery. Sexual slavery. God. Anyway, we're a song from Rojava. Which one is this? I've heard a lot of them. Where is this report? Okay, the report's right there. Oh, I know this song. Oh, yeah, this is a... Oh. I've heard this before. This song unironically made me cry like 3 years ago. God, what a fucking... Oh. Jesus. Let me finish this song. Sorry, this is a banger song. I think Trump supporters will never be able to, like, understand how much I hated Donald J. Trump when he backstabbed these people. There was gonna be... There will be other instances when America acts treacherously. There will be. But this one will always be particularly a painful one. My grades actually plummeted when it happened. I was completely just distraught in 2019 when this happened. Dude, you don't know them. They might fuck you up for being gay. How do you know they like you? I mean the Kurds? I don't think I can show exactly what word they use here, so I'm just gonna scroll up and down. But I don't think they would kill me for it. I don't think they'd be particularly endorsing of it, but they would not kill me for it. I have that flag right here. I got 2 of them. I got another one too. I got a YPG flag in the other room. By the way, if you can take anything from my stream ever, is don't let any motherfucker on the planet try to disrespect these brave heroes, okay? That fought back ISIS. Don't let anyone. They can say like, oh, they didn't fight Assad enough, or oh, they're just like American shills or whatever. Don't let any of them do them. Just fuck them, unironically. There's like not a lot of things I'll ask people to like just believe in good faith on this one. This is the one issue I will ask people to do that for me. Bravely fought random civilians in Turkey. Yo, that's crazy, Randoon Squad. I had no clue that the SDF deployed troops in Turkey.